We're going to start our committee meeting, and we have as guest Suzanne Slack, CFO at the Syracuse City School District. Thank you, Jaime, for joining us as well. And I'm sure there's going to be some more of your staff in the call. So welcome everybody, and want to welcome my colleagues at the Common Council. I see Pat Hogan is in the call, Commissioner Hogan, President Helen Hodgson. I'm not sure if Commissioner Rod is in the call. I think I see something that says team. Oh, and I see there's Michael Green. Hello. And Latoya as well. So welcome everyone. And today we are going to be discussing academics, the reading rooms, E&L services. So Suzanne, you've got the floor.
I think I'm going to begin. Again, thank you, Councilor Paniagua. I have most of my team. Some are here, some are at their houses, but we're going to be sharing information with you regarding student performance first in the district. We're going to begin with the E&L, with the ELA and math scores for last year. Then we're going to go to the high school graduations, and then we're going to go into the intervention programs that we have, the reading intervention rooms that we have at the elementary, middle, and the high school level. Also on the phone is also the director of E&L, Jackie Leroy, who also will be joining us. The first person that is going to do a brief presentation on the data that we share with the board is Chief Moon. And Chief, whenever you're ready. Okay.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
So does everyone have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation? Was that emailed out or shared?
I don't have it. Can you put it on the screen?
I don't know. Can we do it with that?
Yeah, it was sent out and emailed from Jessica at the school district, and I forwarded it just a little bit moments ago. We just got it about maybe 10 minutes before.
Send me a copy of that. Or I don't know if I can.
So it's the PDF that says 4-year August. Is it the PDF that says 4-year August?
Yes, it is. Yep.
I have it.
So I just to start out with the assessment summary, as you're likely aware, we test all of our students in grades 3 through 8 in ELA and math, and in science in grades 4 and 8. The PowerPoint here walks us through our most recent results, which from the previous spring. And it's a 4-year history data from 2016 to 2019. It starts out highlighting our progress in grades 3 through 8 ELA achievement, where you can see 59% of our students scoring at a level 1. That is down from 66% just 4 years prior. And over to the right, you can see the student scoring proficient was 10.9 in 2016, and in 2019 we scored 17.7% proficient. So this is a slow but steady improvement where we're seeing less students score in level 1 and more students scoring as slightly proficient or proficient in ELA. As we go to the next page, we can see the breakdown by grade level. You can see in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 kind of how The percent proficient is applied at each grade level. So you can see our early literacy efforts sort of highlighted in grade 3. So this shows the improvement in learning, and really it encompasses all grades from K through 3. And we're up to 22.5% of the students scoring proficient in grade 3. And that follows through grades 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And as we send students off to high school, last year, 19.4% of our students were scoring proficient. Again, that's the highest proficiency rate in the last 4 years. The next page highlights the difference between 2018 and 19. So we did have far more schools show improvement. They're listed on the left in green, and only 6 schools showed a decline in that time frame. We do track opt-outs. Opt-outs were much more of an issue a few years ago, a little bit more of an opt-out movement at that time. And so we're really down, it's only a handful of students at any one building. So it's not affecting our scores at this moment in time. As we move on and we take a look at grades 3 through 8 math achievement, again, over that 4-year time span, we see 67% of our students scoring at level 1, and it is our lowest in the last 4 years, and 14.7% of our students scoring at the proficient level. And again, very similar to ELA, what we're looking for is a reduction in the percentage of our students scoring at a level 1 and an increase in students scoring at levels 2, 3, and 4. If we look at math proficiency rate by grade, you can see in grades 3, we had a slight decline last year from 23.6 down to 22.4. A nice increase for the 4th grade. We were up to 17.9. Grade 5, relatively flat when you follow that cohort from grade 4, where they were 14% proficient, into grade 5, they were 13.9% proficient. That trend repeats as those students go from grade 5 to grade 6. Again, they were 15.1% proficient in 2018, and that cohort scored 15% proficient as the 6th grade. As we look at grade 7, we saw a 0.5% increase from 10.5% to 11%, and 3% proficient in grade 8. On the next page, what you'll see is the test scores are released by the students that participated in the 3 through 8 testing. Students do have the option of accelerating and taking a high school elective in algebra, or a requirement in algebra. And so as those scores are added in, our proficiency rate jumped from 6.9% to 11.1%. We were roughly even with the number of students that scored proficient in math when we look at the breakdown by building. Again, overall, the district is up, but some schools went up and some schools declined. Again, the opt-outs are slightly higher for math than they were for ELA. Again, we're talking just a handful of students in any one school. As we begin to prepare our students for the 21st century and the skills that they're going to need for here and after, we are slowly transitioning from a paper-based test, or PBT as we call it, to a computer-based test. And this slide represents our results as we compare how our students perform on a computer-based assessment versus a paper-based assessment. So especially in ELA, we saw either even results like we saw in grades 5 and in grade 7, where it had no impact. And in some cases, like we saw at grade 3, we actually see an increase and our students are performing better on the computer-based tests. If we look at the next slide, it compares our CBT performance to our paper-based performance in math. And again, this varied by grade level, where we see paper-based testing in 3rd grade did slightly better, but in 4th grade, computer-based did about 12% better. And so it does depend on grade level when we look at mathematics, but overall, relatively even. In grades 4 through 8 science, we did see a nice increase, especially in our 4th grade scores. We were up from 41.7 to 46.2% proficient, so nearly a 5-point jump. And when we look at it by grade level, our 4th grade is up from 58.2 to 63.2. So again, a very nice jump at the 4th grade level. Our 8th grade improved from 14.1 to 18.6%, and maintain those couple of points. If you look at the next slide, students also have the option of sort of skipping the 8th grade science assessment and taking living environment or a high school credit in the 8th grade. And when we average in the students that scored proficient on the science or the 8th grade math, it's up to 25.8. Again, we see more schools showing gains in science scores and a nice increase across the board in science. Had a sort of a renewed emphasis on lab and lab work, and it did pay dividends for the district. The nicest slot assessment is an assessment that we give our English language learners. We are seeing more students scoring at the commanding and expanding level, and a reduction of students scoring at the emerging and entering level. And this is very encouraging because we know historically that when we are successful in getting those students to master English, that particular subgroup of former Ls, when they're no longer English language learners, is our highest graduation rate by subgroup. On the next sheet, you can see kind of the student count that goes into each one of those levels. So at the lowest level, entering back in 2016, we had 208 students scoring at that level. In 2019, only 96 students, so we've cut that in half. At the emerging level, almost 200 student improvement from 2018 to 2019. And then you can see at the expanding level, those 200 students improved from 2018 to 2019. So a nice improvement on our nicest slot scores. We did include as part of the slide deck a 5-year average for students who take our NYSA. This is a New York State alternative assessment. And this is designed for students who are more severe and profound in their disabilities. Severely autistic students and so on might be the students that would take such an assessment. This represents less than 1% of our special ed population, but the scores at level 3 and 4 are almost, our percent proficient is about 76%. And that assessment is designed around the individual student's IEP goals. So just a quick summary. We've had our highest proficiency level in 4 years in ELA and math. We were up 2.3% in proficiency and 1.2 percentage points in math. In science, our highest level of proficiency in the last 4 years, up 4.5 points. And our nicest slot, we have more students scoring at expanding and commanding. So I know I went through a rather lengthy PowerPoint kind of on speed dial there. Is there any questions about any one of the slides in particular?
So, how long have we had measures of
Okay.
proficiency?
Should I move on to the graduation
Can you hear me?
summary?
Can you hear me? How long have we had measures of proficiency?
I think that is a yes. Can everybody hear me okay?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, team. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
How long have we had measures of proficiency? If you're showing 4 years of data, have we had it for 20? Have we had it for 30? Have we had it for 4 years? How long have we had it? I know they change over time, but how long have we had it?
New York State has required the students to be tested in ELA and math in grades 4 and 8 beginning in 1999. And then as it's rolled forward, a few years after that, we added sort of the odd years or grade levels 3, 5, and 7. And in its current Common Core format since probably there was a major change in 2011 with the way that they scaled the assessments. And then in its current form, I would say around 2013-14, somewhere in there.
Has there ever been a point when the majority of the district has been proficient?
Probably our best scores would have been in 2009 or 2010. And that's because it was scaled against or pre-Common Core assessments.
Okay. So I guess the takeaway is ELA is the highest proficiency in 4 years, but we still have 82% who aren't proficient. And then we have math is the highest proficiency in 4 years, but we have 85% who are not proficient. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Tim, could I ask, who compiles all these statistics?
I didn't
mean,
quite hear that.
Tim, does each teacher compile these statistics, or somebody coordinates them in each school, or how's it work? Tim?
He's asking who puts together the data, team.
Yeah. Who
Are you on
compiles?
mute?
I'm not on mute.
The state does compile the scores. Our students take the assessment. Our teachers grade the assessment and award the points. And then all of that assessment data goes back to the state. They assign the cutoffs for where a level 1, level 2, level 3, and a level 4 student would fall, and then release that data back out to the field, usually in late August or early September.
Yeah, Tim, I'm just wondering, who's the person who compiles the statistics? Is it the teacher in the classroom?
Yep.
Yeah, so the teacher's responsible for all grading these kids on every single paper and putting them into the electronic corridor, and that's how you come up with stats and all that.
Yep.
Okay.
The
It's a lot of work to
individual
do for one
teacher that
teacher.
a student has would not be the one that scores state assessment.
Okay.
You
But
know, just for,
they basically just
balance.
take the state assessment, right? And then teachers are hired separately to grade the assessments, and then the state releases the data. The teachers aren't compiling these statistics.
No, No. But our local teachers are the ones actually scoring the assessment.
Right, but they get paid additionally, right?
No.
No, it's just like you come to work and grade today.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's more common in your suburban districts where they would either hire outside agency or hire a teacher through that outside agency to score those assessments. But we do ours internally here.
Councilor Peniagua is Joe.
I saw you. Go ahead, ask your question.
Thank you. So Tim, I just to be clear a little bit, you said that, and correct me if I'm wrong. You said that the student who move on from ENL end up being the highest group in proficiency. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, and I can, I know that Jackie Leroy, our director of ENL, is on the line. I was referencing if students who are ENL master the English language, when we look at our graduation rates, those graduation rates and that subgroup of students are former Ls. That subgroup of students has our highest graduation rate of any single subgroup.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that I heard that correctly. Now, I'll be willing to wait if you have a slide of what I'm asking ahead. What is the percentage in so say, there's 100 of them. What percentage end up graduating?
64.
For the ENL student? So 64% of ENL students.
No, that's in total. ENL probably has percent of that.
Yes, and that's what I'm asking. What is that?
Mm-hmm. I think we're having an issue with people hearing us. Tim, do you have that number? Do you know how many of the ENL students graduate?
Like,
what percent?
Jackie's online. She may know off the top of her head. I think
Okay.
it's over 80%.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone can hear me.
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
we can hear you
Oh,
now.
good. Okay. I was having an issue with my mute button. This is Jackie Leroy calling. I do know that number. If they are not proficient in English, our graduation rate tends to be around 29 to 31%. If they become proficient in English, we graduate consistently around 90% of them.
Wow.
That's high. Which it can get better, but that's good. Okay. Now here is a follow-up question for me, and Miss Leroy, it's good to hear your voice. Ms. Leroy was actually my teacher Fowler, in case if you guys didn't know.
So we know who to blame, right, Troy?
That was a few weeks ago, and I was the one who hired Mrs. Leroy when I was the principal at Fowler. Few weeks.
Yeah. Okay.
So go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah, my question is.
I think we lost him.
And this goes to superintendent and Tim as well, and hopefully Ms. Leroy. Now, has there been any analysis or study done as to what contribute to the graduation of ESL or former ESL students that become proficient in English? Has there been anything done that could also be translated to help other students? And has it been identified?
Well, that's a difficult question because, you know, in essence, we have to make certain we give students the time to acquire English. You know, and every student, depending on what they bring into the classroom, is going to look a little different from student to student. Making certain that we have the appropriate supports as well as we approach instruction that's going to connect with the student. But once we are able to get them proficient, the question that you're asking, I think, is that how do we know what contributes to the success rate with these students? A lot of it has to do with brain research. So we do know that students who are bilingual, for example, they have a lot of benefits cognitively than students who are not bilingual. And this is a trend that we see nationwide, whether they're in a bilingual program or whether they're an ENL student, that the capacity that the brain has and their ability to use different parts of their brain differs from a student who only knows one language. There are currently a variety of studies in this, but this is something that happens nationwide. It's not something unique to Syracuse. These numbers that I shared with you in terms of the success is something that we see. We also know that, you know, one of the reasons why we're a big proponent of having bilingual education is because if we can have the students early and support them in learning 2 languages, those cognitive benefits we're going to see in the long run once they get in the upper grades. But again, it takes time. You know, we're not going to have a student who comes at the early stage of language of learning English acquire English in just a short amount of time. We need to give them those years to develop it. I don't know if I answered your question, Joel, but I tried.
I'll take it.
So Jackie, even though it's different for every student, that's totally understandable. But is there like a time frame where you see a difference, like from year 1 to 3, 3 to 5? Does it work that way?
It does in a sense. You know, we know on average that students should become proficient in English right around the 5-year mark. But that's if all the variables are similar with that particular student compared to another student. We know some of our students who come in may have interrupted schooling. You know, some of our students may have trauma. There's other variables that come into play. You know, what level of literacy is in the home in the first language. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to always have a consistent factors across with all of our students to say that, yes, all of our students are going to be proficient in English within 5 years. That's the goal, but that doesn't always happen to some students. Some students need 6 or 7 years to become proficient.
Are there any more questions on this subject? Okay, so moving on.
We're going to do the graduation rate presentation.
Sure. Is that the one that says cohort 2015?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so hopefully I'm sharing that screen appropriately. What the chart shows, we track high school graduation based on cohort. Students are assigned a cohort in the year in which they join 9th grade. So when they begin 9th grade, they're assigned a cohort based on that year, and they are expected to graduate within 4 years plus the following summer in order to be considered a 4-year graduate or an on-time graduate. So what you see in this first chart is our last 4 cohorts of students and the percentage of students that were able to graduate in that 4 years plus August time frame. So in 2012, we were at 63.6, up to 64 in 2013. 2014 was 62.5, and for 2015, we were at 64.5. When we look at the individual high schools, we can see a significant improvement at Corcoran, who was 62.6 the year before and up to 71. We see the phase out and phase in of Fowler, and so the hope is that as PSLA begins to phase in and those students represent a larger cohort, that graduation rate will become more consistent with our district average. And as those CTE programs and teachers become more accustomed and entrenched in their content. Henniger was relatively flat. We only gained 1/10 of a point. At Henniger High School, ITC improved from 91.1 to 95.2, and Nottingham took a slight reduction from 63.7 down to 61.5. This slide is this percentage of students that receive an advanced designation. So they take additional coursework in order to be eligible for a Regents Diploma with advanced designation. Again, we're starting to see an increase in the students who earn an advanced designation, higher again at Corcoran and higher at ITC. Even Nottingham, whose overall graduation rate was down a couple of points, did see an increase in the percentage of students receiving an advanced designation. This slide tries to highlight the difference in graduation rate from the previous cohort. So as a district, we were up 1.9 and 1.5 for students with an advanced designation. For Corcoran, up 8.4, up 1.1% in students that receive an advanced designation, and so on. So some of our schools, slightly down, but overall as a district, when we look at our numbers, nearly a 2% increase. When we look at our graduation rates by student subgroup, really what we would ideally like to see is very little variation between the district average at 64 and a graduation rate among one of our subgroups. So when we look at our students who are economically disadvantaged, we see what amounts to about a 3% difference between students who are economically disadvantaged and our all student category. So ideally, those numbers would be the same. Jackie had mentioned before, relative to our English language learners, even though the graduation rate is up slightly for current Ls, the goal here is to really move those students into the former L category. Our students with disabilities is at 44%. Our girls are graduating ahead of that 64%. They're at 70% and well ahead of our boys that are at 59%. So this is one of the areas that sort of warrant a deeper dive, is why we see such a discrepancy between our boys and our girls on graduation outcomes. As we look at our results by race and ethnicity, American Indian and Alaskan Native is one of our reporting subgroups. We do not have a large number of students in this particular category, which account for the large movement that you see in the scale. Asian and Pacific Islander is at 75%, so they are beating our district average. Our Black African American subgroup is at 64%, so they are even with our average. The Hispanic subgroup is at 59%, so they are slightly below the district average. As we look at multiracial, the number of students that we are reporting as multiracial is increasing ever so slightly. We're just getting more accurate about that data reporting. And so moving out into the future, I would expect that to become a little bit more consistent versus what we would see in the drop that is noted in this graph. And white students at 65%. So if I were to break this down, if memory serves, there's only about 0.2 of a point difference between our Black students and our white students. But as we move away from the decimal and put that on our chart here, they're actually closer than they appear. Percentage of students graduating with a local regents or regents with advanced designation after 4 years through August. This compares the big five so that you can sort of see where we fall. Buffalo's at 64.7, so they're only 0.2 ahead of us. Rochester is slightly behind us at 63%. New York City and Yonkers, again, they're out in front of us by a little bit. Total public schools, measuring the cohort the way that we do, New York State reported 83.4 for that particular cohort. When it comes to overall high school and district accountability, we do continue to track students that stay with us for an additional year, or in some cases an additional 2 years. So you see back in 2011, we actually have a report of what that cohort looked like in a 4-year graduation rate time frame, a 5-year graduation rate time frame, and a 6-year graduation rate time frame. And so this really kind of highlight the improvements that we see at the district. Our 4-year graduates are now graduating at the same level that it took students 4, 5, and 6 years to graduate in back in with the 2011 cohort. So as our 2015 cohort enters year 5 and year 6, we should see those averages be able to continue to increase for those students. As we look at a 5-year graduation rate, again, this would be our 2014 cohort. All students are at 67%. We see economically disadvantaged at 65, so again, just a couple of points behind. English language learners down to 35, students with disabilities at 46. We still see that same discrepancy between the girls and the boys, with the girls graduating at 71 and the boys at 62. As we look at the 5-year cohort by ethnicity, again, we see the variation within the small cohort with American Indian and Alaskan Native. Asian Pacific Islander is in the 70s. Black or African American is at 68, and Hispanic at 58. Our multiracial students, again, a small cohort of students at 73%, and our white students at 67. So in this case, our Black students are outperforming our white students with this particular cohort. So just a quick summary, we're looking at the highest graduation rate in over 10 years. Our graduation rate is up 2% from year to year. We have more students earning an advanced diploma than we have had in the past. Our L graduation rates were up by 6%, and our special ed graduation rates were up by 5%. So year to year, a significant improvement. and consistent growth year to year. Is there any questions on the high school graduation performance?
I have a quick question, Tim. With the readings being canceled this year, does that impact the graduation rate in any way?
The COVID issue that we're facing now?
Yeah.
Yes, it's complicated.
Okay.
So some things should help. So New York State has eliminated the regents for this coming June. So if the student has passed the course, they are not required to pass the regents exam in addition to the course. So that should help some of our students that have trouble expressing what they know and have learned on state level assessment. But it does not relieve the requirement for the 22 credits. And obviously with the interruption in education, it can be more difficult for students to demonstrate that they've mastered that content in this kind of blended online packets going home kind of environment.
Thank you.
You also,
Go ahead, Shaw.
So I have a couple of questions. The first one is, you said that ITC is about 90% graduation rate. That, in comparison to other high schools, that it is quite high. What is making it so high over the other one? Is there a reason, or?
One of the reasons is the program that we have in that building. But again, we're also comparing a building that has 125 kids entering in 9th grade, and the other buildings have between 300 to 350. So the number of kids at ITC is a lot less than in the other building. The CTE program in that building, the teachers are working with the kids. They're in contact with the kids on a regular basis. So they're also supporting the kids. But again, CTE, and because it's a small building, that is also making a difference in the building. When we look at Henninger usually has about 400 kids that enters 9th grade. ITC has 125, so that's a big difference there.
Oh, okay. Now you talk about CTE. Thank you, Superintendent. You talk about CTE as is it beneficial?
CTE is very, very beneficial for the kids, but again, the big thing is the engagement and the support that we're providing to the kids. It is making a difference there. We hope that it's going to continue to make a difference at PSLA at Fowler, and that's why we have CTE programs in all the buildings, so kids can choose the program that they want to be part of and the building that they will go for that CTE program. But CTE is making a difference. Our kids are graduating with certificates that they are certified to perform those jobs, those occupations, or they can go to college and pursue a college degree also. So we have more kids completing the CTE programs in the district. And we can do a presentation on another day about CTE numbers in the district.
Okay. Now, I'm just going to ask about, once the kids graduate with CTE certification and stuff like that, is there anything to show what they do after graduating from high school? As you said, some of them go to college, but have they done anything with it in terms of it being useful to them and getting all the investment worth? Is there anything like that?
We're working on keeping track of all the kids. This The last 2 years has been the first year of the kids graduating with CTE certifications. All our programs are endorsed, not putting BOCES down or some of the other districts, but in order for our kids to graduate from a CTE program, they have to pass an exam in order to be certified in that area. So that is making a difference. We have kids graduating that are, kids from ITC last year, from high school, he got a job offer making $60,000. He was in the PTAC pathway. He decided not to go to OCC. He decided to go to work because, in order to support his family and all that. But there's data that shows how our kids are getting jobs or that they're doing great when they go to college. A lot of our kids that are in the PTAC program, they're not going to OCC to finish the pathway there. They're going either to Syracuse University, to the University of Rochester to pursue careers in engineering in those universities.
Is there a way you can share that data with us, Superintendent?
We'll do in a future meeting, we'll do a presentation on the CTE pathway that we have, the graduation rates, the attendance rates, and all that for each one of those pathways, yes. Or I can send it to you.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions from anybody? Okay, moving on.
Okay, the next presentation is going to be the Tier 3 literacy intervention. This is what we talk about, the early reading intervention classrooms and the intervention programs that we have in our middle and high school. So Nate France, who is the assistant superintendent, will do that presentation, and Tim is going to post it online. Oh, Nate? Okay. Or Nate, go ahead. I just went to a different area. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Nate.
Hello. All right. So thank you all for having me here this afternoon, this evening, to share about some of the work that Superintendent is having us work on in terms of literacy interventions. Our current approach to our students who are the furthest behind in literacy is multi-pronged. So it provides intensive support at each of the school levels to minimize the percentage of students who are going to be demonstrating below basic literacy skills. In all of our elementary and pre-K-8 schools, we have what's called an early reading room. In our middle schools or middle grades, any school that has a 6th through 8th grade has intensive reading room or an IR room, and each of our high schools has an OR room. They are set up specifically to support struggling readers, and you can see a little bit of detail on this slide as to how frequently students would be visiting those different interventions and some specifics about each of those rooms. We have been working extremely hard to monitor on the student level what happens and what the impact of this intervention is. It's a pretty significant investment in terms of human capital, the teachers to do this work, as well as supplementary materials in order to, and training in order to meet the needs of these kids. So we want to be tracking the data very closely and not waiting till the end of the year to see how we're doing. So this presentation has some data and around the implementation of this initiative for the first 4 to 5 months. We have trained multiple different school-based staff in order to, in the data-driven decision-making process. So we have disciplinary literacy coaches in each building and intervention teachers who are establishing baseline data, working with experts to establish appropriate and rigorous goals for students and figure out exactly how frequently they're collecting the data, and then what decisions to make once they have the information about the students. We primarily use two key assessments in order to monitor the progress of students on an ongoing basis. The first one is called STAR, Early Literacy and Reading. So every single one of our students in grades K through 12 takes this assessment. It's a universal screener. It's computer adaptive in the sense that when you sit down and start taking the assessment based on how you perform on the questions, it changes and gives you a different question based on your previous answer, whether you got it correct or incorrect. So instead of just giving a student a fifth grade assessment, that fifth grade is going to work on as to mastery, as to where they are on the continuum of learning. What's nice about it is also it's widely used across New York State and across the country. So you can measure growth in comparison to how other students who are similarly performing, their academic peers are performing. So you can see if they're growing faster or slower at the same rate as other students who would be who had performed similarly to them on recent assessments. We also use what's called the DIBELS Oral Reading Fluency assessment, and this is used in grades 1 through 10. This is a nice, very short 1-minute probe that teachers are going to use with students in these different intervention rooms to test and see how they're doing. Again, it's only a minute, and what it does is it really zooms in to help students understand, or help teachers understand, where the student is making progress, where they are still struggling. And it's extremely sensitive to the point where a student may not show a lot of growth on the big assessments that Tim is showing, or even on the STAR, but you can monitor whether or not they're making appropriate progress using DIBELS in that 1-minute time test. Just so that you're aware of sort of the demographics data, the reach that these different rooms have. The ER rooms, that's only servicing grades 1 through 3. And we have about between 17 and 24% based on the grade students who go to that room on a daily basis and meet with an expert in getting kids caught up in literacy. This graph represents the STAR early literacy data for all the first graders and some of the second graders that go to the ER room. What it shows, the STAR test provides, based on scores, sort of groups that the students would fall into, intervention groups. So are they in need of intense intervention, are they on grade level, or are they above grade level? And what we did was, based on the assessment in the fall, they fell into one of those 4 different buckets of students. And then we gave them the same assessment in the winter. And you can see 40% of the students jumped in intervention level, moved up in the intervention level. So they might have been significant, they might have been an intense intervention and moved to urgent, or moved from urgent intervention to on grade level, or moved from on grade level up. So we saw a pretty big impact in a short amount of time for 40% of the students there. And that doesn't mean that the 59% weren't growing. They just didn't do enough growth to trip them into a different intervention bucket. The STAR early reading data, this represents older students who would be in this group, so second and third graders. We didn't see as much impact on the students who take the STAR reading assessment, partly because those students are even further behind, and the work that they're engaged in is challenging, and it's going to be a long haul to get them back on track. So they're further behind, and they're not showing as the older they get, the gaps grow larger. So that was one of the concerns that we saw from this, and are doing some brainstorming as to how to have a better impact on students who may be a little bit older. There's a lot of information on this slide. I don't expect anybody who's not necessarily in education or super fluent in data to understand what it is. But this is just an example of the type of information that our teachers are collecting in order to see that even more sensitive impact than those larger intervention groups. So this shows just a sample of grade 1 in their oral reading fluency. On the left-hand side, you can see the rate, so how many words are they reading per minute? And on the right-hand side, you can see their accuracy. One thing that we've noticed as a trend is that their accuracy is increasing, so they're getting closer to that yellow line than they were before over on the right-hand side. And they are also getting closer on the left-hand side with the words per minute. But we found that students, because they're learning all of these different sounds and letters and how to blend them together, that their accuracy is going up much faster than their rate. And that's common, but overall students are closing gaps even if they didn't necessarily go into a different intervention level. One of the things that we wanted to collect information on specifically, and we think has a huge impact on the data that we're seeing, is the attendance rates. The interventions that we're doing aren't going to make an impact if the students aren't attending school. And so you can see there that first grade, second grade, and third grade, we have between 37 and 41% of our students who are missing 10% of the school days in between fall and winter. So that's a concern. We picked that number because that's what trips a student into being chronically absent, and the impact of chronic absenteeism is enormous on performance. So even if the students, we are brainstorming ways to incentivize student attendance and get students in. Schools are tracking that because we know that it's going to be important, particularly for these students who are receiving an additional intervention. So based on the data that you saw, as well as a ton of different other data, here are kind of our key takeaways for our youngest learners, those kids in those ER rooms. Really making sure that we target kindergarten classroom for early literacy coaching support. So we have a lot, again, thank you to the superintendent's investment and focus on early literacy. We have some great people who are able to work across schools and go into schools and really help out kindergarten teachers make sure that they are teaching those early literacy skills to the best of their ability. We want to focus there because, as you can see, as the kids get older, it's much harder to fix that. We also want to take a look at some of the growth rate discrepancies that fall across different grades and different schools. When we're collecting data that is this at this grain size, we can see that some are more effective. We want to build on those strengths. We want to coach in areas where we may be of need around a specific skill or around maybe a building. And in a couple ways that we've done that is we just had teachers visit other classrooms in other schools and have principals visit other classrooms in other schools so that they can see what a high-performing teacher is doing in those times and bring some of those best practices back to their classrooms and schools if necessary. And then, as I said before, we just have to figure out ways to increase student attendance, brainstorm as many possible ways with families and the community as possible to get kids to school every day. This has to do with some of the older kids. So these are the kids in the IR and the OR room. Again, we're taking a look at students who are growing and moving up an intervention level from the fall to the winter. And we can see here that the IR and the OR room showed some pretty significant jumps. 18% of kids moved up an intervention level, which again is really tricky to do. And 15% of our IR students also moved up in that reading. And these are students in grades 6th through 9th grade. We also are looking not just at the overall intervention level, but also the growth percentile. So how are students growing as compared to their academic peers? Students, I want to go to the ER category, so the second and third bar over. These are students who were in the ER room in 2019 and 20 and did not receive that service in the previous year. You can see the difference in the growth percentile. So if you're growing over 50%, that's where we want folks to be in that 60% range. So you can see last year, those students, they did not grow as fast as their peers. With this ER support, they are growing much faster with, 60, 66, 67% of them growing over the 40th percentile from there. The IR stayed steady. We think one of the reasons is we had put in place some specific interventions for middle school students previously. And so we didn't think that it had much of it would be sort of flat because of that additional support, but they're maintaining and showing progress. With the OR, that's the one at the high school. These are students who were in 8th grade last year, how they grew compared to the beginning of this year. And you can see there is a difference in that. So we see the growth component also showing that we are onto something and that we need to continue to commit to this and research even more. This is, again, that DIBELS oral reading fluency component. This is an example from an IR room in 6th grade. And you can see, again, that while they didn't move from the strategic above the benchmark component, they're closing that gap as we move through the year. And so the trend line is moving in the right direction. And we would anticipate, that the intervention is working and that we need to keep doing it at the same dosage that we were. Our IR OR sort of mid-year point checkpoint key takeaways that students at these middle grades, they are having some decoding and accuracy and fluency issues, but we're closing those things and that we need to continue to do the same thing. 40% of the students were demonstrating accelerated growth rates. 50 to 60% are maintaining those average growth rates. And so we want to sort of explore that, and for particularly the students who aren't necessarily growing. And we also need to address gaps in vocabulary, or just that these kids need vocabulary and comprehension support. And this intervention at the middle grades is going to take more time. And that also the monitoring of the progress is a little bit more challenging, just given how old they are and what it is that we're trying to look for and see. That was a lot of information. Happy to open it up to any questions that you might have. He knows this data pretty well too, so he may be able to jump in at any time.
Oh, here we go. So in the beginning of the presentation, you were talking about the impacting factors that causes our children to read under their level, and you were talking about chronic absences. Mm-hmm. Do we keep any kind of track of what those may be, so we can, work around it? I mean, support the families in any way? Is that something we do?
Yeah. So Superintendent, please feel free to jump in.
Oh, go ahead.
So we track chronic absenteeism on a student-by-student basis at every one of our schools, and also by subgroups. And schools have different strategies that they're working specifically with families on. This is something that Chief Wright Williams in her parent engagement notebook has a whole page on chronic absenteeism, the impact of that, and being able to sort of graph out how many absences they would be. The partnership that we have with Harvard has provided us with some great strategies that really do make an impact. We send postcards home when a student misses a day. and the teacher says what it is that they missed, how many absences they have, and the impact of that. And that postcard gets sent home. And we've seen that that has an impact on increasing attendance going forward. It's also something that we review as a senior leadership team on a weekly basis in the superintendent.
So this information you send home, these postcards, and is that language appropriate? Some of these families, they don't, their English is not their language at all, or first language. So do you have that capacity?
Yeah, the notes and the letters that go home, they're translated into the 5 basic, languages that we have in the district. So, and I just want to give what the state considers a kid that is chronically absent is a kid that misses 10% or that has 18 absences during the school year.
And then another question I had is what percent is the children between grades 1 and 3 reading under their level?
Overall, I'd sort of go back to some of the information that Tim shared. So those percentages, I think, hold true with some of our younger learners as well. I would have to go back and look specifically, since we don't have the state assessment, on something like STAR, and I can get you guys that information. Sure. I apologize for not having it handy, but it ends up looking similar to what it is for 3 through 8 also.
Okay.
But the data that Tim shared at the beginning, if you look back during the last 3 years, we have put an emphasis on literacy in the district, starting at the kindergarten level, and that's why we have seen an increase at the 3rd grade and the 4th grade level on the ELA proficiency rate in the district. Are we there yet? No, but we're making progress.
It's about moving the needle, right?
In the right direction.
Right. Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions?
I do, Rita.
Go ahead, Charles.
So Superintendent, I see that I guess the ER is as you see is the process of literacy intervention, right? That's correct, right?
Yes.
Okay. So from kindergarten to 3rd grade, how many students, or what's the percentage that on average that need intervention by the time they reach 3rd grade?
By the time they reach 3rd grade, I don't have the exact number right in front of me, but we can get it to you. But we can see that we have reduced the number of kids that we're providing intervention, that we have provided intervention during the last 2 years. But even though that we have the early reading intervention, we also still have some academic support teachers that are providing support to the kids in the 3rd grade, 4th grade, and the 5th grade level. When we look at our number of kids who could benefit from their early reading intervention, I would say at least 60 to 70% of our kids can. We don't have a teacher at each grade level, so that's why we have selected those kids that they have the biggest need in order for us to provide the services. And this came from Blueprint 15. I had the opportunity to go and visit a school in Atlanta, and they have 3 teachers in a classroom providing support. So knowing, our financial situations, I took the idea and I replicated just to have, by having 1 teacher and 1 TA, and it's truly making a difference in the reading levels with our kids.
Okay. And is there a way to test that? Once they get to a 3rd level, there's a way to test that, right? Whether they are ready or not.
Yes, and we have seen that with the STAR assessment that we're doing. And one of the things, the conversations that I'm having with the principals right now is that they were ready this year for our kids to take the ELA exams because they thought that, we really were going to show significant progress on the ELA score this year. Our teachers have been working hard, but not only our teachers, our kids have been doing an amazing job. And our parents, I mean, they have been engaged, supporting the kids, working with the kids at home. So we were looking forward to the results for this year, but COVID-19 has taken over. We continue to support the kids. Our early reading intervention teachers are working with the kids directly, providing work. Some of the lessons that we're doing through Channel 24 include some of these skills that our teachers were working on. So we hope that our kids are not going to regress that much, and that we will be able to continue to show significant gains in our scores.
Superintendent, Rita,
Yes.
can I jump in?
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Okay, one, I want to say good job on what you guys are doing. Good job on how
Thank you.
you managed to get the kids, you know, prepared and get the teachers ready through this COVID period. But I have some questions, and I need to find out if you have the answers. I asked previously for the dollar amount of all of the outside programs that's working in the schools.
Suzanne sent that. We send that information. Suzanne sent that information.
I didn't see it, but okay. So with that being said, do we have the data from those groups that's working in the school?
All right. This is the information that Suzanne sent.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So the data is on there as well?
For
the outcomes for all
that information is out there. That's the cost. We are doing an evaluation of some of the programs, and we will send you the information of the program that we already evaluated. We can send you that this week.
Okay. My next question is, how many of our schools are in receivership? Did he say 6? Was it 6?
No, right now, in true receivership, there are 2 schools, Clary Middle School and Lincoln Middle School. The other 3 schools that were on receivership last year, they were changed. We had to close that program. They're in good standing for the state this year. We need to continue to support those 3 schools, STEAM at Dr. King, STEM at Blodgett, and Brighton Academy. So those 5 schools are the ones that we're still providing a lot of support. 3 years ago, there were 18. 4 years ago, there were 18. We're down to 5 that we are providing the ongoing extra support for those schools.
Okay. And then I heard one of the gentlemen mention that less than 1% of the disabled population. And what I want to get at there is, what have we done? Because I've had some of the parents of children with disabilities, and they were basically saying that there was no real preparation for the disabled children to be able to stay on top of their home, their work.
Our special ed department prepare a packet for every single student in the Syracuse City School District that receive special education services, and those packets were delivered to their houses. That information was for 4 weeks. Right now, they're working on the second set packets that are being delivered to the houses. We provided iPads, and we'll continue to provide the laptop for the kid that needs that in their IEP. So we're providing all that extra support for our kids.
Okay. And my last question is the STEAM school. So how many of our kids are going to be able to attend the STEAM school?
If we have an enrollment of 1,000 kids, 600 kids will be, when we're at full capacity, 600 kids will be from the city of Syracuse. It's 60% from the city and 40% from the county.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent.
You're welcome.
Done, Rita.
Okay. Are there any other questions from anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you for joining us in this Education Committee meeting. More to come. I heard you said that you could bring to us some information about how we're doing with the CTE programs. I would love to hear about that and how we fund them and how they move forward our children into careers and different options that they have after attending the CTEs. So coming next, we can do something with that.
And that will be the only presentation because it's Bob Leslie and Bob can't talk.
I remember that.
And Chancellor Green, congratulations on your beautiful baby that I saw online.
Thank you very much.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so well, thank you everybody, and we'll see you soon. So thank you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you all. Stay safe. Thank you for your
Thank you.
service and stay safe. Bye,
Thank
guys.
you. Bye.
Bye.